Welcome everyone back. Information item 5.1, ESSA. We have Darren Nielsen and Leah Voorhees. We're ready for your presentation. Sorry, we're a little bit behind, but
Okay, I'll
see
take
what
that as a
happens
hint
here.
to try to go quickly. Part of going quick is going slow. If I can do things correctly, it might minimize the number of questions that come up. And a reminder that this is an information item. My name is Darren Nielsen. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Student Learning. I'm at the table with Sarah Young, Chief of Staff, and Leah Voorhees, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support. And it's a privilege to be here to talk about this agenda item. I do need to acknowledge that over the last number of months, and we'll go through the timeline, a platoon of USBE staff member have contributed to this work that you'll see in your agenda today. So go ahead and go to the next slide. I think it's important to understand, as we talk about ESSA, especially our audience that might be listening, these acronyms that we have might be confusing. So I'm going to go back to 1965 briefly, when the Elementary and Secondary Education Act was passed by the United States Congress and signed into law. That legislation directed large amounts of federal funds, we've been talking about that already today, to the states to help address educational challenges that had been identified across the country. That gets reauthorized periodically, and the most recent one was the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was authorized in July 8th of 2015 in the 114th Congress. Prior to that, the No Child Left Behind is another reauthorization that might sound familiar to some of our audience members. That was the previous reauthorization of this original act to provide funding to state education agencies across the country. The plan, as you see, is 121 pages. It's a plan that the State Board of Education, as you can see here, approved back in July of 2018. With, prior to that, a large number of stakeholders across the state of Utah drafted that plan. I don't even think I could estimate the number of people that were affected or involved in that process. The plan itself is driven, or our interest in reauthorizing the plan is driven by three things, but let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about the role that the State Board plays in this. So on the plan, the Utah State Board of Education creates a plan that describes how states choose to use the federal funds in alignment with federal code. So there's targets for these funds. Title I, for instance, is really targeted to our students who are most economically disadvantaged, our schools that have large populations of those students. We see funding in the plan around migrant education and other categories. There's actually 9 programs that are included in this consolidated application. The Board of Education works with the public, as I mentioned earlier, to create the original plan. And if it gets reauthorized and the boards are challenged with creating new plans, that process, which takes well over a year, would be engaged in. And then the state plans, as part of that engagement, it does require consultation with the governor's office in each state. And then the plans were approved in the board meeting that I mentioned on the previous slide. So what's driving us to open up this plan that was approved and to recommend amendments to it? Really, the trigger mechanism was the COVID. If you go to the next slide, was the COVID. Whoops, go back. Sorry. Was this amazing disruption that the COVID pandemic created on our educational settings? And you might recall that the Board of Education, both in the spring of 2020 and the spring of 2021, submitted addendums to the Utah Consolidated Application, the ESSA plan, that put in place waivers to in 2020, waivers to state assessment and school accountability and a number of other requirements in the plan. In 2021, it was a waiver on school accountability. And those addendums, which were expedited processes, you might recall it was simply one meeting for each of those and didn't require a lot of dialogue. So it's more of a checklist of the things that the State Board of Education was seeking waivers on. Anything that was affecting a single year was allowed to be included in the addendum. There were some items, including moving the goals. Each state's ESSA plan has academic goals that are connected to it. And those needed to be advanced more than a single year because of the 2 years disruption from 2022 to 2024. And that triggered a requirement that the State Board of Education then complete an amendment to go along with that. So we have some of the changes that you'll see in the plan related to COVID changes or impacts. Some of them are related to updating the plan to align with current board legislative directives. And then we have, because we are doing the work anyway, to really look at ways to improve the plan. And as I heard Board Member Hymas share the quote this morning, I'm just going to repeat that briefly. If anyone can refute me, show me I'm making a mistake or looking at things from the wrong perspective, I'll gladly change. So in our setting, as we work for you, a different way of looking at that for us is if anyone could show us there's a better way to do something, and that there's data to support that, then we want to make a change. And so we're looking at this opportunity to bring about some of those changes as well. So we've begun this work some time ago. Again, we've had 29 USB staff members working on this. We've also consulted with the Assessment Accountability Policy Advisory Committee about items that were specific to their work, and other groups that exist in our LEAs, Title I directors, multi-language learner directors, and other groups have been involved to this point as well. We come before you today as an information item to let you know that we're going to public comment. There'll be a 14-day period of public comment that will open up tomorrow. And then the plan is we'll come back, we'll take that public comment, consider it, incorporate recommended changes, and then bring the recommended amendments back to the board for action, which I would expect would be a much more lengthy, or potentially a more lengthy discussion in the November board meeting. That concludes the presentation.
Questions? Member Earl?
Yeah, I just had a question on the opening up of this document. Who made that decision? I guess I'm wondering. It just was open, and so we're just continuing to modify because it was open for COVID.
Yeah, Chair, can I
please respond?
answer that? Yeah, so when the board approved the addendum, especially the most recently submitted one in the spring of 2021, it included a request to advance the board's long-term academic goals by 2 years. Because the addendum allowed for that, but it also required an amendment to the consolidated plan to be instituted if a state chose to request a change to their consolidated application that extended beyond a single year. So that, Board Member Earl, that was the trigger that created the opportunity for us to open this up and look at ways that we could improve it. And I'll highlight a few of the things that, in addition to the goals, the goal timeline, we're making recommendations around the calculations of growth for the school accountability system. Those were discussed in APAC, and so we're trying to advance that again as a way to bring about improvements. We've implemented our current accountability system since 2019. The EL, English Language Learner students, is another area that you might remember discussion in our APAC meeting around changing the exit criteria for that. So you'll recognize when you look through the plan, those are some areas where we believe through experience and through the data that we have, there's ways to make improvements to the plan. You'll see incorporation of the Utah Board's current strategic plan and Portrait of a Graduate initiatives, which weren't in place when the plan was submitted back in 2017 to the U.S. Department of Education. So those are a few of the examples of things that you'll find in the plan under the red line changes. And the public will find those as well.
I'm not seeing any other comments on this, but thank you for your work. And the main purpose of this is to publicly, because it's on our agenda, it will get more attended or more, what would I say, attention. So it's not a surprise come November, oh, what's this big amendment? And so I appreciate the support, information, and all the work that's gone into this, and I'm anxious to see what happens on the public comment side. So thank you for your work there. I think we have another question or comment. Member Earl?
It's a 30-day comment period.
There'll be a 14-day
14-day.
comment period, so you'll see a flurry of communications from your staff, probably beginning tomorrow morning through all of our listservs and the social media outlets that the State Board of Education has. And then, again, I want the board to be aware, there's been discussions about this with the groups that we support from the LEAs, these different leadership positions before today as well. So there's an awareness that the plan is being worked on and looked at, and amendments. And many of the specific recommendations have been discussed with assessment directors, Title I directors, and other LEA representatives.
Thank you.
And the other part of this, just to help our awareness, so over the next coming weeks, as we choose to get more familiar with the proposed changes, and that we'll be better prepared for November, which will most likely be an actionable item. So not seeing any other questions or comments. Thank you very much. We know this is a lot of work. Okay, next we'll have Deborah Jacobson, who loves to do a lot of public speaking. She's filling in. Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones isn't going to be able to be with us, so we're anxious to get into our monthly budget reports, and this is all information, non-actionable. So Assistant Superintendent Jacobson, you're on.
Thank you. Hold on, I'm trying to get this pulled up really quick here. Okay, Assistant Superintendent Deborah Jacobson for the board. This is your monthly budget report, and I'm here to testify that USBE is in a good sound position and can cover all current and future obligations. So that's all I really have on this one.
Okay, any questions
It's
or
pretty-
comments? This has been in our backups, and appreciate you filling in for Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones. Not seeing any, please continue.
Okay, so also in your backups, you'll find, again, the monthly update on the COVID funds. It's information this time. We were not going to do the deep dive this time, but we do have Chief of Staff Young available if you have any questions on that.
And we usually go, if I remember right, every other month to get the comprehensive updates, but is there any questions? And I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, so
So-
if there's no questions, I can move to the
There's any-
discretionary.
Let me just follow up one more time. Any questions on our budget, discretionary funds report, any reports? And if you do through the month or in preparation for these meetings, Deborah and Scott are always anxious to serve the board, so thank you for your service there. Thank you. That was short. All right.